All right, I'm Pops. This Side of Paradise is this week's Star Trek original series rewatch video, and I have to admit, I didn't really get anything out of it that warranted like some live reaction shots. So it's just going to be me kind of talking about the episode in pretty generic, high level terms. So let's get to it. All right, so we're going to go out to deep space with the Enterprise and the crew. They're going to come across a planet that's full of colonists that should have long since perished because they've been exposed to this radiation called the Berthold rays. There's like a scientific word salad that's done here before Kirk puts together a party that's going to go down and basically investigate and find this deserted area. And they have like these comments about how sad they are. They have these grand ambitions when these colonists went there, and obviously no one's there. But wait, surprise, surprise, not only is everyone still there, they're very happy, jovial. In fact, they've actually been cured of most of their illnesses. They're actually doing exceptionally well. Then we have Layla, who's introduced. Now, Layla has ties to Spock, some sort of meeting in the past. He is still very cold and aloof towards her, but it's very clear early on in the episode that she's in love with him. Now, the episode is very simplistic in its nature. It has some sort of element that these flowers, these plants have this thing that happens where they shoot these spores, and basically we end up with this basically like this hippie slash lotus eater metaphor, right? These spores in this planet, they themselves are resistant to these quote Berthold rays, and when you're infected with them, you are also now immune, and you actually have sort of a healing process that occurs in your body. That's what plays out over time. It was very sort of like open. They kind of show their cards pretty early on with Sulu. He comes across them very early on, and they're in the foreground. And then, of course, once you get Spock exposed, you have this zaniness where he's not even in the uniform. He and the Layla are just like, they're like the best buds again. They're having their love. He's swinging from a tree at one point. He's being insubordinate to Kirk and everyone else. And I have to be honest, I was just not that into all of this. So this is lending itself to sort of commentary on this sort of leisure type lifestyle, saying hi on stuff, going, hey man, just kind of hang out, be peaceful, man. Everything's going to work out, man. Not having to work, which goes directly in the face of the traditional Judeo-Christian values, and men need work. So that's kind of the interesting sort of like setup for things. Kirk has found himself to quote be immune early in the episode, and then randomly is not immune later on when this thing is on board the Enterprise. And he also, because everyone basically is getting infected once they come across the Enterprise, and Kirk kind of like the lone man. Now there is a couple moments that don't make a lot of sense where Kirk goes down and comes back. I don't know who's beaming him up. It's addressed later on in the episode when he's there by himself, giving sort of a last transmission. And this is when he gets his little conversion, if you will. And then he's kind of saying his buys. He's packing a bag. He's going through all of this, and then he kind of realizes there's an emotional moment. And supposedly, your emotions is what breaks you out of it. Now, I don't know exactly why. Why are we supposed to believe that the people that have been on the planet this whole time have never been exposed to any emotions? They're just so even. There's not been any elements of like an accident that would cause pain or an outburst or angry, betrayal, anything. The other thing that I don't like about this at all as well is early in the episode we have nothing can survive, but look at all of the land in the background and the forest. So I don't totally understand what is immune and not. Like I guess mammals at this point are the only ones who would be affected, but that's not true either because they talk about being vegetarian. So I don't know I don't know why the everyone else and everything else can survive. That is the spores presumed to be anything? We just don't explain away some of those kinds of elements. So, and then at the end, he is going to now be confrontational and attack Spock. When Spock comes on board, they end up in this big fight, and Spock is basically superhuman at this point, like totally violent. And what's weird is I don't mind all of this. What I didn't like about this is Spock never talks about there's no reference to his human emotional side. Like this is the thing about later on with Vulcan. It's the scene with his mother where she's like, "Well, yeah, Spock. I mean, you're logical, but you also have a human side." So the fact that he would have these emotions towards Layla previously and suppress them because of his Vulcan side, and now this drug through these spores have brought out the human side. I think all of that is great narrative for Spock and really develops the character, makes him more interesting and dynamic. I don't know that really comes out perfectly well in the episode, but that is how it moves the character forward. And there's just a little bit of commentary before you get to Layla and how things play out a little bit. And then at the end, there's like this really, for the first time in my life, I was happy because she still loves him. And we're not even sure what the dynamic of the relationship was previously. It's just not really spoken about. I will say this too. I like the episode in contrast to not liking the Spock relationships into the new Star Trek reboot, like the fact that he's like with Uhura and the fact that there's other stuff that was done with like New Trek, the emotional Spock, and some of these relationships and like that. The fact that there is this, and it's not something that is sort of controlling Spock, he keeps it at bay, is more interesting to that backstory than he's had this on and off again girlfriend. So, all in all, I think that this isn't a great episode for me or anything like that. This is them coming up with some sort of machine that makes everybody emotional, and that's how the episode sort of ends. McCoy has this little ongoing gag about wanting to drink a mint julep. Like, I don't know. Is that supposed to mean something? I just think it was a weird thing that is in there. Because all in all, I thought the episode was just okay. I will say, at least the conversation that they were having then with this sort of hippie class of people who didn't want to work and didn't want to contribute to society, and how they wanted to live their life high on some sort of drug, we do at least could look at this episode in the same vein with AI and the conversation of, would we still have to work? Does man need to have a purpose? What would that purpose be? Can you just live in an AI world, kind of like a Ready Player One, where you're not actually in the real world? You're in this little fantasy land that doesn't exist, and things that manifest that affect other people. That could also be part of the conversation from this episode. So it's a heavier, more thought provoking. It's pulling from a lot of literature, obviously, because obviously the title is pulling right from, I think it's F. Scott Fitzgerald, and maybe his first book. It's an early book for sure. And obviously Lotus Eaters is definitely a big part of the Odyssey. And so this concept has been around for years, coming across these plants that basically or have some sort of narcotic or something kind of makes you lazy or you're out of your head, man, and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. This doesn't really resonate with me. It's not really an episode that I would be care about rewatching, but I'm also willing to admit that this works really well for the time and what they were trying to add some social conversation into the mix. I think they just kind of went a little. I think they kind of drove themselves into corners and didn't know what to do. So it's like, well, how can Kirk get out of this? Oh, he's just emotional. What? He just has an outburst of emotion that makes him out of it. I'm like, okay. I mean, that makes no sense whatsoever. So I'm just shocked that there was not something with him being on the Enterprise or the spores being on the Enterprise that would have lent itself to what Kirk would discover. Like, he could have just stumbled across an answer that would have made it a more plausible thing to do. And then that would allow them to have something they could do to the planet and the group that would have brought them out of this sort of trance from the spores. So those are my biggest things. I think that the Spock stuff was fine. I think it's a little interesting trying to shoehorn some backstory stuff in here but not explain it all the way. So that has a lot of positives. I don't think there are any really negatives from that. I think the negatives were they took it too far for those new movies. But most of the other character stuff doesn't really matter too much. It didn't really ever get too bonded to anything otherwise. So, and that's my general take on this week's episode. Thanks for watching. I am Pops.